There. Go ahead, Michael.
So our question that we're going to be talking about first says a female student reported that she was being sexually harassed by a male student. As the male student enters your office carrying his bag, you notice a strange scent coming from the bag, which you believe is marijuana. Discuss how you would handle both the sexual harassment and drug infraction, and how does procedural and substantive due process relate to this situation. So, just talking about the drug infraction first, because I think that's what you noticed immediately when he walks in. Is I guess if you have reasonable suspicion to do a search to make sure to see if he has anything on him, I think you have to make sure you're following the school's policy when it comes to uh, drug use at the school, and there should be some sort of policy that you as administrators have to follow if you have suspicions of a student having drugs on them or the scent being disruptive to learning for other students. So I think just as the administrator, you make sure that you're following that process. I think that kind of follows with the procedural due process that talks about in the book, which is a prescribed set of steps to be followed that allows for students and school personnel to seek kind of the like fairness before actions are taken against them. So just having that policy in place beforehand, I think helps administrators kind of do their job and make sure that they're protected as they do that search to make sure that they don't have any illegal drugs on them.
Yeah, to jump in with the drug part of the problem there. Yeah, I thought you were right on by saying, kind of recognizing, you can kind of pick up things like the smell of marijuana and things like that. And if you have that reasonable suspicion, you can do that because you don't necessarily need that the probable cause that law enforcement would need. I would definitely add to it that you need to make sure that another adult is present while you're searching as well, because they are technically a minor. And you also want to make sure you're not infringing on their Fourth Amendment protections. And then, as you said, if drugs are found, you do need to follow those school rules. And sometimes it can include discipline, sometimes it can involve law enforcement, or it can be both, depending on the laws of the state.
Yeah, I think it's just important at that disciplinary actions that you're following the school handbook or the school policies. So it's kept consistent from student to student if this were to happen more than once.
To add just a little bit to that, I would definitely address this first, just for safety, like you just mentioned. Um, this is like an immediate safety concern for anybody really in the school, and it would definitely be a valid reason to act here first.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the procedural and substantive due process for the drugs, procedural, we need to make sure that we tell the student why they're accused and let them respond, kind of tell their side of the story. And you also need to give written notice if there's any punishment, and you also need to explain your decision, um, whether you do give punishment or not. If we're talking more substantive due process, you need to make sure that any discipline is fair and it fits the offense. And, obviously avoid cruel or unusual punishment, which again, you have protections from the Constitution.
And then I guess the second part of that part of the question is talking about the this is the female originally making the accusation of being sexually harassed by the male student. I think just as the administrator, you also have to probably just go through and make sure you're documenting everything that she tells you, interviewing the male student about what his side of the story is, and just making sure that everything that you either talk to them about or are following, that you're documenting what you're doing. That way, if it does go to the law, you're protected because you have documentation of everything that you've done.
I definitely agree that you handle the drug concern first, and then you move on to the sexual harassment one. I put in there, make sure that you inform the male student that a report was made by a female student. Would have made sure that you document everything so that way you know how everything was done to make sure procedural and substantial due process was done. That helps guarantee the fairness and appropriate actions were taken for both issues. I also put in there that I would put in a where is that? Would put in like a protection thing for the female student while it was being investigated and followed up upon, so she wasn't being harassed by other students or by that male individual.
Yep, I think it's important that these are two separate investigations for the sexual harassment. I would talk with the female student, obtain a written statement, gather evidence like the boys had mentioned, and like Neil said, ensure protections are in place for the female student, and inform both parties of their rights and the investigation process while maintaining confidentiality on both sides.
So one thing I would add in addition to everything you guys are saying is I would first notify the Title IX coordinator of everything that's going on to help start the investigation because you kind of need all hands on deck for this kind of situation. And then the other thing is just, you got to stay neutral and take detailed notes. Don't just pick one side or the other. Get all the facts. Let law enforcement help you out. Let the school team help you out as well.
Yeah, so to kind of wrap this one up, I feel like it's really important that this is like a balanced, immediate investigation that started, both for safety and for policy enforcement with both of the two issues that we're talking about here, with a thorough and fair process for these personal accusations, taking every step that needs to be taken and to follow school policy while doing so.
All right. And then our second question that we were tasked with is as follows. It says, as the principal of a school district, you determine that it is necessary to use a breathalyzer on all students as they enter prom. Discuss the procedures you must take in order to perform this test legally. So just some of the things that I had written down is that I think before you do this is that you consult the district policy on student searches, drug and alcohol testing, and kind of the prom procedures. But I also think it's a good idea to talk with the school attorney or the district's legal counsel to ensure that this practice aligns with your state's and the federal law, especially Fourth Amendment protections. I talked about how probably gaining school board or superintendent approval and getting that in writing is probably important before you move forward with doing so. And then if you're going to do this, making sure that there's a clear, well-developed policy that you're going to follow as students come in if you deem that it is necessary to breathalyze all students.
Yeah, on top of having a clear policy, you need to have a good reason as well. Whether you do breathalyzers, metal detectors, you have to have a valid safety reason and concern. Like if you're trying to prevent underage drinking at a school event, that might be a reason to have it. Or if you have an alcoholism problem in your community. And also keeping it fair and respectful, treating everyone the same way. Try to do it privately and respectfully as well, and make sure your staff are properly trained to use the breathalyzers. If you do have positive cases, make sure you handle them carefully. Just stay true with your discipline, follow the policies, let students explain, contact parents, and make sure, above all, that you protect your student rights. Make sure that the test isn't too intrusive and that it follows the law, and give notice and treat all students equally to avoid legal issues down the road.
So one of the things I added to it, on top, you mentioned having trained staff on board. Our school actually does this, and we even use law enforcement officer comes to the prom and he administers the breathalyzer test before they're allowed to enter into the dance area. And then I just said, make sure there's already predetermined consequences for what's going to happen if there's a policy and let the students and parents know ahead of time what's going to happen as well if they test positive. So that way there's plenty of advance notice, like this is required. You could even go as far as to have a parent consent form with the purchase form for prom tickets if you want.
Yeah. Yes, I think everything I kind of have was covered. Just going off of making sure it was done by the trained professional. I think a police officer coming in is probably a pretty common thing. Just then you know that the equipment is real and liable as well. Making sure you're keeping records of everything and doing it in a private setting. Going back to the beginning, bouncing off the reason for doing it. It's important, like if it's important to maintain the safety and order at the school sponsored event, could be something that you use.
Yeah, I think everything I've been thinking has been brought up as well. I think just keeping it fair and consistent throughout everybody so you don't run into issues of just doing it to certain groups or certain kids, just keeping it consistent during that entire time.
Alrighty, I think that kind of wraps up both questions that we had.
Yeah.